Hi everyone, I'm back after a big old pause. I had some issues with my health. I ended up having to have some x-rays on my chest and some other things, and those didn't look too good. And I kept coughing to the point where I couldn't even speak, which really got in the way. Um, so yeah, but now I'm able to talk without coughing every 5 seconds. So yeah, I thought we'd watch some Mugen together to kind of get back into this groove of videos. So I hope you guys enjoy.
Japan is a country like any other, comprised of both positives and negatives. If you're familiar with the country, then one of the big negatives that you might already be aware of is the slave labor work culture, where you get paid absolutely nothing and yet still have to give up everything. But another major negative in the country that happens to be more of an open secret is the worrying rise of stalking related incidents. This has long been an issue in the country, but its turning point was actually in the year of 1999, when a typical stalker case turned into a disastrous murder that humiliated the nation's police due to their pathetic handling of the.
Also, I'm gonna be chewing, so I'll probably be moving around. I got home late, and so I'm eating while catching up. Okay.
Entire case. Today, and 26 years later, we recently found out from a report that cases involving stalking in Japan are currently sitting at an all-time high. And in the first half of 2025, we witnessed a stalking case so disastrous, so mismanaged by the police, that it made people start drawing parallels between it and the tragic case from 26 years ago. So what the hell happened, and how is this something that the country is not going to forget about anytime soon? Well, let's talk about it. Alright, so to truly understand the significance of this incident, we have to go all the way back to the year 1999 in order to talk about the story of Ino Shiori, a 21-year-old university student at the time. You see, on January 1999, Ino would meet a guy at an arcade by the name of Komatsu Kazuhito. They got to know each other that day and shortly afterwards started dating. It didn't take long, though, for Ino to start noticing some pretty severe red flags. For example, Komatsu would all of a sudden start buying her some very expensive luxury items, such as Louis Vuitton handbags and Gucci clothing. Ino wasn't so easily swayed, though, and didn't really care about materialism, so she would refuse them. Komatsu wouldn't take this well at all and would start screaming at her and causing scenes in public. At that point, Ino knew that this guy was crazy and started to slowly distance herself from him. Komatsu noticed that and threatened to hurt her unless she stayed with him, and so she did, until she was finally able to leave him months later. This is when Komatsu would effectively lose his mind. Over the course of the next 4 months, he would spread letters and posters all over the neighborhood to slander both Ino and her father. The harassment got so bad that both Ino and her father went to their local police station in the Saitama prefecture and presented them with these posters, these letters, even license plates and photos of certain cars that were spreading the slander. And of course, the police couldn't care less. They didn't assist in any way, shape, or form, which of course only served to leave Ino and her family defenseless. This entire harassment campaign and Komatsu's obsession would reach its conclusion on the 26th of October 1999, when Ino would be in the middle of commuting to her afternoon class at university. She biked all the way to Okigawa Station, and as she was getting off, a man armed with a knife would end her life on the spot. By the time her body had made it to the hospital, it was already too late. It turned out that Komatsu had hired a hitman for 20 million yen, an obscene amount of money, in order to take her out. But one could only wish that the story really only ended here. No, things got substantially worse. As the parents of Ino were grappling with the fact that she wasn't with them anymore, the same Saitama police station that refused to help them attempted to cover their own asses by fabricating misinformation about Ino as a person, spreading lies about her, saying that she was a promiscuous woman, even going as far as calling her an escort, someone who sells her body to men for money. Shortly after, Japanese tabloids as well as mainstream press would also run with that same narrative, slandering her name and running it through the mud even further, even after she had lost her own life. Instead, it took one independent journalist by the name of Kiyoshi Shimizu to expose what Ino truly went through with her family over the course of 1999, and to expose the complete incompetence of the police, as well as exposing the people behind her death. It was a national embarrassment, with 3 senior officers being dismissed immediately and a few others having their entire salaries cut. This was such a serious
Yeah.
issue that in the year
Deserved.
2000, lawmakers passed the Anti-Stalking Act, giving victims of stalking and harassment more power by allowing police to intervene before a situation becomes serious. And to this day, this remains a pretty big deal. One quick Google search and you'll see testimonies from many people living in these so-called first world countries venting their frustrations about how they went to their local police station, told them of a stalker, showed them proof, and the police refused to do anything, even going as far as saying we can't do anything until the stalker does something.
Yeah.
In other words, we
I've
can't
had
do
my own
anything unless
experience
the
with
stalker
this,
hurts you, which by then
and
would be too late. So to be fair, Japan was
it does
definitely one
happen.
step ahead with this law passing,
You think in
but it was still
countries
far
where you
from
don't
being
think it
perfect.
happens, it
Stalking-related
happens.
violence still occurred multiple times, and the law was revised 3 different times throughout the years. Once in 2013, once in 2016, and one more recently in 2021. Each of these revisions aimed to give victims even more power when being faced with a stalker. The most recent revision in 2021 actually changed the legal definition of what stalking is, specifying that making silent calls or calling or transmitting using a fax machine or sending text messages through any text messaging service
still
persistently
faxing.
despite his or her rejections is enough to be classified as a stalker. There were also more specifications in this revision, like how if someone was walking in your neighborhood repeatedly and you felt like they were stalking you, then the police could intervene. In a perfect world, giving so many tools to victims of stalking would effectively mean that stalking is now extinct, right? Well, unfortunately, we don't really live in a perfect world. And as you saw in the beginning of the video, stalking incidents keep increasing, not decreasing. And the latest stalking related incident that just occurred in 2025 is a grim reminder that what happened in the year 1999 to Ino can still very easily happen today. Alright, so we're now in the year of 2025, and our story takes place in the Kanagawa Prefecture, part of the greater Tokyo area, more specifically in its capital city, which is Yokohama, renowned for many aspects of its cultural heritage, as well as its very big and varied Chinatown district. This story involves Okazaki Asahi, a 20-year-old working a regular office job, and on the other hand we have Shirai Hideyuki, a 27-year-old who's unemployed. They were both in some sort of a romantic relationship together. We don't have an exact timeline as to when they first met and started dating, but what we do know is the first time that Okazaki reached out to the police. On June 2024, Okazaki reported having a nasty physical fight with Shirai. She went ahead and reported this to the local law enforcement, which in her case was the Kawasaki Rinko police station. As far as we know, they wouldn't hear back from her until September 2024 when things would escalate further. This is when she would file an official written complaint, saying that she got injured after they had gotten into a physical fight. Things weren't very straightforward though, because a month later, on October 2024, she would go ahead and
domestic
withdraw
violence.
that complaint, essentially saying that
I'm
she
gonna have
didn't
to
want to
censor
press
that maybe
charges
for
anymore. So the
YouTube.
police didn't bother looking into this further.
But yeah,
obviously,
no,
things
this is what
aren't
this
that
is.
simple. In fact, what's really interesting here is that on May 2024, just a few months prior to this, the National Police Agency of Japan called on prefectural police departments to place priority on protecting the victim when romantic entanglements break down, because problems can escalate rapidly and lead to violence. This was an official statement made by the National Police Agency. And you had a woman who was saying that she was in an abusive relationship, talking about physical harm, who had so far made a complaint in June and a written one in September, only to then withdraw it in October. But don't worry, because barely a month later in November, she would file yet another complaint against him. So of course you're probably wondering, now that there's been so many different instances of complaints, what did the police do so far? Well, they verbally warned Shirai 3 times, as if the guy had publicly left trash on the street or something. And I think it would take common sense to understand that if
I was
you just
munching, and I think
warn
that made me
someone about domestic violence like this, they would be able to very rapidly conclude who made the complaint against them and punish.
Are you serious? Oh, we're harassing you. He's beating you up. Stop that. That's not allowed. That is literally what the police did. Was, just, give him verbal warning. That ain't gonna do nothing. The man's hitting her. He doesn't care. His moral values are out the door. Oh my god. Anyways, let's continue.
Them for it. So one could even go as far as saying that the police made the situation even worse with how they conducted themselves. But this was nothing compared to how they let down both Okazaki and the entire country of Japan in December 2024. On December 9th, Okazaki would call the police station 9 different times. And in 3 of those 9 calls, she would explicitly say that she spotted Shirai in her neighborhood walking around, even though he didn't live there. This call also wasn't random. This was someone who had filed multiple reports on Shirai with the police prior to this. It should have been a top priority. However, with that in mind, the police only bothered to tell her to not leave her house. That's it. And they didn't bother looking into this further, even though she had called them 9 different times. Thanks to the Anti-Stalking Act that we saw earlier in the video, the police had full legal right to intervene here. But they didn't. And you know what the worst part is? We have a video of him literally prowling outside of her house while looking directly at the window in the creepiest way possible. I mean, watch this. This was recorded on the 12th of December, where we can clearly see Shirai prowling around the neighborhood, looking directly at the window of the house of where Okazuki was staying. If I saw this outside of my window, I would be creeped out beyond belief. It was recorded by one of the friends of Okazuki who was staying with her, no doubt because she felt way too scared to be alone, and it was sent to the police on the same day. But again, nothing. Shortly afterwards, Okazuki would call the police yet again to let them know that Shirai had stolen her bicycle. Again, nothing was done. And on December 19th, barely a week after the video of him walking around prowling outside of her house, things would escalate to a living nightmare. On December 19th at around 10 p.m. in the evening, Okazuki would call her local police station to let them know that she was fearful for her life. No doubt telling them that she could see Shirai prowling around her house. She was told to call back during daytime. On December 20th at
the
7
police,
a.m.
you're supposed to be
after no doubt
active
having a sleepless
24/7.
night, Okazuki called the police station yet again and was told to call later because no one could take her call at the time. This was the last known interaction anyone had with Okazuki because
they're
after
messing
this,
everything
she
up
would
here.
vanish and no one would be able to reach her ever again. During the entirety of all these phone calls, she was seeking shelter in her grandmother's house. It looked like this. On December 22nd, just 2 days after Okazuki had disappeared, her grandmother had called that same police station and told them that her granddaughter had not come home, adding that the window in the house was broken and saying that this was probably done by her ex-boyfriend. The police made their way to the house and proceeded to explain to the grandmother that there
You're gonna be in
were
trouble.
more glass fragments outside than inside the house, having the gall to suggest that the glass was broken from the inside, not the outside, insinuating that it was her granddaughter that broke the glass to somehow escape from the house rather than someone trying to break in. They took photos of the broken window, but didn't even bother collecting fingerprints. The poor grandmother, who was practically being ignored by the police, had to file a written report for them to finally go back to the premises and collect fingerprints, which unfortunately, as far as we know, didn't lead anywhere. Things got even crazier on mid-January 2025 when Shirai's own family would call the police and tell them that while they don't have any concrete proof, they believe that Shirai murdered Okazuki. The police would later admit that they found this call to be unproductive because it didn't help them find the exact whereabouts of Okazuki. Unproductive when Shirai's own family was saying this about him. It's insane. What's even crazier is that on January 24th, the police would find Okazuki's stolen bicycle in front of Shirai's house. For whatever reason, this didn't raise any suspicions in their book. Since December 20th, 2024, which was the last time we ever heard of Okazuki, up until March 2025, Shirai would be questioned 7 different times by police. During 3 of those 7 times, they searched Shirai's house with his consent, meaning that they didn't have a search warrant. He just simply allowed them to come in to show that he wasn't hiding
really
something.
confident,
but this also meant that they couldn't be as thorough as they would have been with a search warrant. With all that in mind, though, it was only on March 25th, when they were interviewing him for the 7th time, that they started getting suspicious of him. Throughout all these different interviews, he kept saying that he had no idea where Okazuki is, but on March 25th, he finally admitted that on the 20th of December at 6 a.m. in the morning, he went near her workplace in order to hopefully meet her, but couldn't because she didn't go there. The police, as I said, were starting to get suspicious of him, but the true suspicion arose when Shirai left the country shortly after the 7th interview. He left Tokyo to go all the way to San Francisco. This is when the police would finally get off their asses and get a search warrant for his house, going in to thoroughly inspect it while Shirai was out of the country. This is when they would finally find the whereabouts of Okazuki. The investigation team could sense that there was something wrong in the house. This was a traditional Japanese house made up of wood, which meant that the floor was a bit elevated.
Did he bury her under the floorboard?
Floorboards. The police started removing those floorboards one by one and eventually made their way to the kitchen floorboards. This is when they would find a bag buried deep under those floorboards, and in that bag they found a humanoid figure. And the reason why I say humanoid figure is because initially they couldn't even recognize it since half of it was skeletonized. It was a partial skeleton. It turned out that Shirai, in his pursuit of getting rid of evidence, was slowly barbecuing the corpse, hoping to only have bones left. And he had plenty of time to do that gradually, seeing that he had 4 months to do so up until that point.
He better have not been eating her.
Analysis, the police was able to conclude that this was indeed the corpse of Okazuki.
Oh my god.
So on May 3rd, when Shirai's plane finally landed back in Tokyo, the police was waiting for him at the airport to immediately arrest him on suspicion of mishandling a corpse. What he did was horrendous in every way, but people were wondering, how was he allowed to get this far? The incompetence of the police to the point where they even enabled this murderer to continue doing what he was doing, that was on the same level as the incident back in 1999. But today we have a stalking act that's been revised 3 times. The police couldn't say that they couldn't act. They had every legal right to do so. 20 days after initially being caught at the airport, Shirai was both indicted and charged with damaging and abandoning a corpse, without specification as to whether he acknowledged responsibility or not. Police vowed to continue investigating the case, but obviously, as you can imagine, Okazuki's family is outraged beyond belief.
Yeah.
On May 3rd, when Shirai was initially arrested, they protested outside the police station saying things like, "You killed her. You're the reason why our daughter left this world." And at this point, it would be hard to disagree with them. However, the Kanagawa Rinko police station has defended its handling of the case, claiming that Okazuki didn't want to file stalking charges against Shirai and that there was no indication she regarded his actions as stalking. Many found the statement to be ridiculous because she had filed multiple reports against him and by December was claiming to have felt unsafe over him walking outside of her house and even providing proof of that. We literally saw a video of him walking around in the creepiest way possible. Shortly later, a prefectural police spokesperson said they would review the office's handling of the case. But again, that's too little, too late. I can't imagine what the family and the parents had to go through for 4 months until they finally received closure in the worst way possible. This was so significant that the father of Ino Shiori, the woman who was in the 1999 case, had something to say about it, stating, "I want members of the police station where the victim sought help to think again about whether the way they respond recalls their mission to protect the lives of citizens." Serving a grim reminder to the nation that even after 26 years, Japan hasn't really improved with how it handles cases of stalking. If anything, it's gotten worse. A national police agency official in Japan who handles such situations has been quoted as saying, "I feel quite strongly that what matters the most in implementing those measures is the awareness of each individual police officer," specifying to us that even though the tools and the laws are there, what really matters in the end is the individual police officer and how willing
the
they
police
are
officer
to help
who you're
people
talking
like
to
this.
doesn't take you
Look,
seriously.
this is obviously
it doesn't help.
very tragic and so frustrating. It's like, why are you even a police officer if you don't do anything? But what's crazy here, obviously, is that both Ino back in 1999 and Okazuki in 2025 are both regular members of society. We're used to seeing news about how celebrities and news anchors and public figures always have to deal with stalkers because of their fame, but this can literally happen to the most regular, average person you know. Okazuki literally worked an office job. But like anyone on the planet, she sought love, she sought a partner, and to do that, you have to date multiple people, and she simply got unlucky with Shirai. That shouldn't cost her her entire life. The same exact thing had happened to Ino. It sucks. I hope that Okazaki is the last person to have to suffer something like this, but both Japan and the rest of the world have a long way to go until people can finally feel safe when having to deal with a stalker. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Please stay safe out there, and I hope that you never ever have to deal with a police station as incompetent as this one. I'll see you in the next video, whenever that is. I love you so much. Mwah.
Alrighty, thanks for sticking to the end of the video, and I'll see you guys next time. In case you're wondering, model did change recently. It's a custom of my model did change recently. No, I'm just not gonna include that.